Okay, so you want to buy a mansion in Beverly Hills. Find the house behind the hedge, wire the money, put your name on the gate, and own a piece of the most famous zip code on Earth for as long as you feel like owning it. Palm trees down the middle of the street, a motor court that holds 6 cars and never holds 2. The pool house you'll convert into a gym and never use. A chef who knows how you take your eggs, and a view that turns orange at 7 every evening for free. Land that has gone nowhere but up for 80 years. In the 4 square miles the rich have been buying since the studios were built. That's what the listing photos sell you. That story is clean, and it is wrong from the first sentence. Wrong about something more basic than money. The thing you think is one house is 2 completely different assets wearing the same name. Let's start with what you think you're buying. You think you're buying an address, and the address is the whole point, because in Beverly Hills, the address is a brand that took a century to build, and it comes preloaded into the price of every house that gets to use it. But the address is a postal fact. It is printed by the United States Postal Service, and the Postal Service does not draw city limits. Beverly Hills is a separate incorporated city sitting inside Los Angeles County, with its own police department, its own fire department, its own school district, and its own municipal code. It is surrounded on almost every side by the city of Los Angeles. And north of it, up in the canyons above Sunset, there is a large stretch of hillside that carries a Beverly Hills mailing address, gets mail marked 90210, and is not in Beverly Hills at all. Locally, it's called Beverly Hills Post Office. The envelope says Beverly Hills. The map says Los Angeles. 2 houses, 4 minutes apart, both with 90210 on the mail. One of them is inside the city, one of them is in Los Angeles wearing a Beverly Hills name tag, and almost everything that determines what those 2 houses actually cost to own runs off the line between them, not off the mailing address. Start with the schools, because that's the cheapest place to see it. The in-city house is zoned to Beverly Hills Unified, a district of a handful of schools funded by one of the wealthiest tax bases in the state. The house up the canyon with the same zip code is zoned to Los Angeles Unified, the 2nd largest district in the country. If you're a buyer with 2 kids and a preference, one of those houses is worth a lot more to you than the other, and the listing will not lead with which is which. It will lead with 90210, then the emergency services. When something goes wrong at the in-city house, Beverly Hills Police and Beverly Hills Fire respond. Up the canyon, it's LAPD and LAFD, out of stations serving a city of 4 million. In 2012, a 911 call from a Beverly Hills post office property produced a public, documented, jurisdictional mix-up about which agency owned the address. That's the actual product difference between 2 houses with identical stationery. And then there's the part that moves real money. In April 2023, the city of Los Angeles began collecting Measure ULA, the tax everyone calls the mansion tax. 4% of the entire sale price on transactions above the lower threshold, 5.5% above the upper one. Not 4% of the gain, 4% of the gross. The thresholds index every July, and for the current year they sit at roughly $5.3 million and $10.6 million. In December 2025, a California appeals court upheld the tax against a challenge from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. So the thing is real, it's collected, and it's here. It applies inside the city of Los Angeles. It does not apply in the city of Beverly Hills. Run the same $20 million sale on both sides of the line. In Beverly Hills, you pay the Los Angeles County documentary transfer tax of $1.10 per thousand, which is $22,000, plus the city's own transfer tax of 55 cents per thousand, which is another $11,000. Call it $33,000 total, roughly 1/6 of 1%. Take that identical house up the canyon into Los Angeles city limits. You pay the same $22,000 to the county. You pay the city of Los Angeles $4.50 per thousand, $90,000, a tax that existed long before ULA and stacks on top of it. And then you pay ULA at 5.5% of 20 million, which is $1,100,000. 33,000 versus roughly 1.2 million. Same house, same zip code, same view. The difference is which side of a line on a map the driveway sits on, and that difference is about 36 times the annual salary of the gardener who maintains both properties. Here's where it gets interesting, because that cost does not land on the buyer. It lands on the seller. At the moment, the seller wants out. Which means when you buy the Canyon house, you are buying a house with a $1.2 million exit fee already attached to it, payable by you on a date you don't get to choose. Nobody at the open house is going to mention it. It isn't a line item on the disclosure. It's a feature of the pavement. Now, the price of getting in. Say you're buying a real one, not a nice house, a mansion. $25 million, flats of Beverly Hills, north of Santa Monica Boulevard, 9,000 square feet on a lot you could not replicate today at any price. You will not get a normal mortgage. Loans at this size are portfolio loans held on a private bank's own books, and they are not really underwritten against the house. They're underwritten against you. The bank wants assets under management, a relationship, a deposit balance, and often a pledge of liquid securities alongside the property itself, which means the loan is cheap only if you are already the kind of client the bank wants for other reasons. If you're not, the pricing gets ugly fast, and the honest version of the deal is that the house is collateral in a broader arrangement where the bank is lending against your career, not your roof. Say the bank wants 40% down. $10 million of cash walks out the door before you own a doorknob, and $15 million becomes debt. At 7%, the interest alone is roughly $1,050,000 a year, and none of that builds equity. And here is the thing, nobody explains about financing a house at this level. The tax code stopped participating. Interest is deductible only on the first $750,000 of acquisition debt on loans written after December 2017, and the 2025 tax law made that cap permanent rather than letting it drift back up. So, on a $15 million loan, you deduct interest on 5% of your borrowing and eat the rest. The mortgage interest deduction is a middle-class subsidy that the buyer of a Beverly Hills mansion is structurally excluded from. The same thing happens to your property taxes. The 2025 law raised the state and local tax deduction from $10,000 to $40,000, and then wrote in a phase down that cuts it by 30% of every dollar of income above $500,000 with a floor of $10,000. Nobody buying a $25 million house is under that income threshold. The deduction gets handed out and clawed back in the same paragraph, and the clawback is aimed precisely at you. You pay the state's taxes with federally taxed dollars at full price. Which brings us to the property tax itself, and this is where people who've only heard of Proposition 13 get it exactly backwards. Proposition 13 caps how fast assessed value can rise, 2% a year, no matter what the market does. That's the famous part. The unfamous part is that the cap only protects the person who is already there. The moment the house changes hands, the assessment is reset to what you just paid. Effective rates in Los Angeles County run around 1.1 to 1.2% of assessed value once voter-approved bonds and direct assessments are layered on. On $25 million, that is roughly $280,000 a year, starting the year you close. Then it ratchets. 2% compounding guaranteed in a year the house appreciates, and in a year it falls 30%. Over 20 years, that 2% floor turns a $280,000 bill into something over $400,000, and not $1 of that increase requires the house to be worth more, or you to be doing well, or the market to be functioning. This is where the first trap opens. Every part of the entry math above assumes you hold for a long time. The transaction costs are enormous. The exit tax on one side of the line is punitive, and the carry only makes sense amortized across decades. The whole structure is built for a long hold, and in February 2021, California deleted the long hold. Before that date, under Proposition 58, a parent could pass a primary residence to a child at the parent's old assessed value, with no cap on the property's worth. A family that bought in 1978 could hand the house down and hand the 1978 tax basis down with it forever. That is how families kept these estates. Not income, not cleverness, a statutory exemption that let the tax bills stay frozen in a decade. Nobody alive in that house remembered. Proposition 19 ended it. Now the child has to make the house their own primary residence, file for the homeowner's exemption within a year, and even then the exclusion is capped at the old assessed value plus $1 million. Anything above that gets reassessed to market. And if the property isn't the child's primary residence, a second home, a place they visit, an estate they can't actually live in because their work is in another state, there is no exclusion at all. Full reassessment at market value. Work out what that means for a Beverly Hills estate. A house carrying a $2 million assessed value from decades of Prop 13 protection, worth $40 million today, passes to 2 adult children. Under the old law, it kept its old bill. Under current law, unless one of them moves in and the arithmetic clears the cap, the assessment goes to $40 million and the annual property tax goes from roughly $24,000 to something near $450,000 overnight on a house that generates no income at all. So the heirs sell. They almost have to. And that is the pincer. The asset is priced and structured as a multi-generational hold. And the law that made multi-generational holds possible is gone. Every one of these estates is now on a clock that ends with a sale. And if the driveway is on the Los Angeles side of that line, the sale pays 5.5% of gross on the way out. Now, the other side of the ledger, what it costs to simply keep the thing standing and habitable. Start with insurance, because California's high-value homeowners market has been coming apart in public for 4 years. State Farm stopped accepting new California homeowners applications in May 2023 and non-renewed roughly 72,000 property policies across the state in 2024, concentrated in high wildfire score neighborhoods. Allstate paused new California homeowners and condo writing in November 2022. These are not small regional carriers deciding to reposition. These are the 2 largest names in American home insurance declining to sell the product. That matters more in Beverly Hills than almost anywhere, because the part of the city everyone actually wants, north of Sunset, up in the hills, is designated a very high fire hazard severity zone. That designation is not decoration. It obligates you. Brush clearance is mandatory, inspected annually by the Beverly Hills Fire Department starting in the spring, with penalties for non-compliance. New construction and major work in the zone has to meet Chapter 7A of the State Building Code, fire-hardened materials, ember-resistant vents, specific roof and eave assemblies, and fuel modification standards tightened again at the start of 2023. Every one of those requirements is a line item you pay, and a thing the house cannot be without. When the admitted carriers leave, you land in one of two places. The California Fair Plan is the backstop, and it will write you a residential dwelling policy up to $3 million. That limit was set by order of the insurance commissioner in November 2019. And it has not moved since, while the cost of rebuilding a 9,000 square foot custom house in Los Angeles has gone somewhere else entirely. $3 million is a fraction of what your house costs to replace. It is not insurance for a mansion. It's a deductible with a state seal on it. So you go to the excess and surplus lines market, where carriers will write the number you actually need. Understand what you're getting. Surplus lines carriers are not rate regulated by the California Department of Insurance, which means the price is whatever the market says this morning, and there is no filing process standing between you and a doubling. And they are not backed by the California Insurance Guarantee Association. If an admitted carrier goes insolvent, the state fund pays your claim. If your surplus lines carrier goes insolvent, you are a creditor. You have been protecting a $25 million asset with a promise that has no flaw under it. Then, January 2025 happened. The Palisades and Eaton fires produced insured loss estimates of $20 to $25 billion and $8 to $10 billion respectively. The Fair Plan, which had grown from around 200,000 policies in 2020 to more than 450,000 by late 2024, with total liability exposure in the hundreds of billions, carried roughly $4.8 billion of exposure in those two burn areas alone, and was authorized to assess the private insurers $1 billion to cover the gap. Read that mechanism carefully, because it's the one people miss. When the insurer of last resort runs short, it bills the other insurers. The other insurers price that assessment into next year's premiums. Which means the cost of a fire that happened in a neighborhood you don't live in arrives in your mailbox anyway, and it arrives every year, and you have no way to appeal it, switch away from it, or insure against it. Your fire premium is no longer a function of your house. It's a function of the state. Now the staff, which is where owners consistently underestimate by an order of magnitude because they budget wages and forget they've become an employer. A house of this size does not run on a cleaning service. It runs on an estate manager, housekeeping, grounds, a chef if you eat at home, and security if your name is known. Industry compensation surveys put an experienced Los Angeles estate manager around $185,000, a private chef in the $150 to $190 range, and a genuine 24-hour security detail, which is 4 people minimum because a day has more hours than a shift, north of $300,000 a year. Those are wages. On top of them sit payroll taxes, and California requires household employers to carry workers' compensation coverage for anyone working meaningful in-home hours. And California household labor is governed by its own statute. The Domestic Worker Bill of Rights, in effect since 2014, entitles personal attendants to overtime at time and a half, beyond 9 hours in a day or 45 in a week. Your live-in staff have a legally protected hour count. The dinner party that runs long is a payroll event. The weekend guests are a payroll event. You did not hire help. You founded a small company whose only product is your own comfort and whose only customer is you, and it has a compliance obligation. The city has opinions about your schedule too. Construction hours in Beverly Hills run 8 to 6 on weekdays, with Saturday work near residential zones, requiring an after-hours permit, and Sundays and holidays effectively closed. Any renovation you undertake runs on the city's calendar, not yours, and every week that calendar adds is a week of contractor overhead you pay for. Even the water is a policy instrument. In 2015, during the drought, the state of California fined the city of Beverly Hills $61,000 for failing to hit its mandated conservation target, and the city passed the pressure straight down to the properties generating the usage. Warning letters went to dozens of the largest customers. David Geffen was billed more than $30,000 for roughly 1.6 million gallons over a summer. Amy Poehler was billed over $2,000 for 170,000 gallons. The lawn, the pool, the mature landscaping that makes the property what it is, these are the visible, meterable, publishable evidence of exactly the behavior the state has decided to punish. Your garden is a political liability with a monthly invoice. Add it up on the $25 million house. Property tax, $280,000. Insurance. Call it 120 in the surplus lines market for a hillside property and rising annually for reasons outside your house. Staff, fully loaded, $600,000 if you run the place properly. Maintenance on 9,000 square feet of custom construction, pool systems, HVAC zones, a motor court, and an acre of irrigated landscape, $250,000, and that's a good year with no roof and no retaining wall. Utilities, $60,000. Call the carry $1.33 million a year before you make a single mortgage payment. Now, here's the part that reorganizes everything. Look for the revenue line. There isn't one. There is no revenue line. This is the only asset class people discuss as an investment while it produces, structurally and permanently, nothing. A $1.33 million annual carry on a $25 million asset is a negative yield of 5.3%, which means the house must appreciate 5.3% a year, every year, before you have broken even against the cost of possessing it. Add the financing, and you need more than 9. Add the exit tax if you're on the wrong side of the line, and the first several years of appreciation belong to the city of Los Angeles. So the honest description is this: you have not bought an investment that happens to be expensive to hold. You have bought a subscription to an address priced at over $100,000 a month, and the resale value is the refund you hope you get at the end, which is survivable if the exit is liquid. It is not. The University of California, Los Angeles studied what happened after ULA and found that the odds of a Los Angeles property selling above the tax threshold dropped by as much as half. The tax collected between $280 and $350 million a year against projections of $600 million to over $1 billion, not because anybody evaded it, but because the transactions stopped happening. Sellers, on the wrong side of the line, looked at 5.5% of gross and decided to keep the house. When you tax an exit hard enough, you don't collect more money on exits. You collect fewer exits. That's the seller's side. Here's what it means to you as the owner. Your buyer pool at $25 million is small enough to name a few dozen people a year in the entire region who are looking at your specific combination of location, size, and style. Average time on market in Beverly Hills has stretched from around 67 days to 86 in a year, and that's the whole market, including the merely expensive houses. At your level, the number is measured in seasons. Every month of that is a month of carry. So a house that takes 14 months to sell has quietly charged you $1.5 million for the privilege of being patient. And the ask is not the price. The ask is a press release. Chartwell, the estate in Bel Air, went to market at $350 million. It was cut to 195. It sold to Lachlan Murdoch in December 2019 for $150 million, a record for Los Angeles at the time, and 57% below the number that generated all the headlines. The Playboy Mansion in Beverly Hills asked $200 million and sold to Darren Metropolis in 2016 for $100 million, exactly half. Which brings us to how these properties actually die, and the cleanest example anyone will ever get. The one in Bel Air, 105,000 square feet, built by a developer named Niall Niami on a promise of $500 million, financed with construction debt from Hankey Capital. $82.5 million in 2018, over $110 million by early 2021, and a total default of $165 million by that September. It went to a bankruptcy auction in March 2022, listed at $295 million, and the hammer came down at $126 million, $141 million with the buyer's premium. To Richard Sagian, the founder of Fashion Nova. Follow the money out of that transaction because it's instructive. The developer lost everything and ended up in bankruptcy. The buyer got the largest house in the region for less than a third of the number that had been attached to it for 6 years. And the lender collected interest on $165 million for 4 years against a property he could always take back. Nobody in that story made money by owning a mansion. One person made money by financing someone else's belief in one, and one person made money by waiting until belief ran out. That's the pattern underneath the whole market. The reliable money in Beverly Hills real estate is made by people whose relationship with the house is temporary and transactional. The developer who buys a tired estate, entitles it, rebuilds it, and is gone in 30 months before a full year of carry ever lands on him. The lender who is paid for time rather than exposed to it. The broker who earns on both directions of a market that pays nothing in between. The person who wins is the one who never has to answer the question that defines actual ownership, which is what this costs in the 11th year. And notice what the developer is really buying, because it isn't square footage. In the city of Los Angeles hillsides,